welcome back to Liquid Lunch here. That's Blue Venus today. And we are we have Parth Doshi and Lorinda Crawford from New Acropolis. And Parth, you're from Boston.
I am, yes.
So welcome to Toronto. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
And Lorinda, you're right here in Toronto,
From Toronto,
right?
yes.
And so I didn't realize there was a New Acropolis. I knew there was one in Toronto and Montreal, but I didn't realize there was one in Boston as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one in Boston, one in India as well, and across more than 50 countries all over the world, actually.
Okay, great.
Wow.
Now you're here in Toronto and you're giving a talk this weekend on Gandhi, right?
Yes.
The power to change the world.
Yeah.
Which is really important because this is the year it has to change.
Yeah. Before, as you probably heard with the Mayan myths and everything, we want to be going down.
Well, so I don't know what's going to happen. Well, we're further south now.
All right.
And you're a little further south in Boston too, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the weather in Toronto sort of reflects what's in Boston.
Really?
Actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been quite warm.
And Montreal too. Montreal's getting Toronto weather this year.
Get out.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Okay. So so Parth. So let's talk about this. First of all, what's your where do you get your expertise from in Gandhi, and what give us a little bit of what Gandhi, how we could change the world using some of the principles that Gandhi talked about.
Sure. So that's obviously a big question.
Yeah. So I'll just sit back
yes
here.
or no, you can eat your lunch now. He's giving you the answer.
So yes, I mean, I'm originally from India. I was born in India, and I actually came to the U.S. Almost 10 years ago, just for my undergrad education. And growing up in India, Gandhi and his prevalence, it's there partly because he's called the father of the nation. India was under British rule for many hundreds of years, and Gandhi led resistance against the British, which led to India's freedom in 1947. So in India, we actually have the birthday of Gandhi that's celebrated every year on October 2nd. So, obviously I grew up in a culture where, he was a prevalent person that everyone knew about. But, over the years, as I, traveled to the US and just going through my own life journey, I always had the deeper question about, how did he become the person that he was? Was he born as someone that was great and just destined to be great? Or was he just an ordinary person like, all of us, and that he went through his own transformation in life to be able to become the person he was and make the changes that he did? So when I actually encountered New Acropolis, and I met New Acropolis in Boston, I live in Boston right now, that's where a lot of questions were raised for me in trying to learn more the human dimension of Gandhi. And the talk actually focuses not so much on just Gandhi and what he did for India, because obviously there's a lot of historical achievements, and he led India to this freedom. But more than that, he became a spiritual icon for the world to look on, and more than anything else, he was an idealist. And that's something that was really important for me, because I grew up just culturally in a place where ideals of truth, love, justice were really valued. But in the world we live in today, that's something that's not given as much value to. And more importantly, it's hard to know how do we bring these things to life in the daily life we lead. And so, looking at all those factors, what was interesting for me to research and learn and study about Gandhi's life is, what allowed him to transform these ideals that are common not just to the people of India, but to every human being around the world. How could you translate that into reality? How could we be an example? How could we bring about a change? And so that just led me on an exploration to rediscover Gandhi after I met New Acropolis in a different light. And through that I started giving lectures on Gandhi in Boston, and then from there I've given lectures on Gandhi in Montreal and Ottawa, and this weekend in Toronto.
Okay, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
If you were Gandhi today, what would you do to change the world?
That's a great question.
So the first thing I think it starts off is with the individual development, because when we start looking at the problem of what we face as a humanity, or we look at the world as we speak, it's a massive project. You know, to even change a small part of a city, to bring about, you know, even aside from a city, to bring about change even in ourselves as human beings is so difficult.
That can be the hardest thing.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And, you know, so the idea being that, you know, society and human beings today might come across as independent, where all of us are sort of in our own small bubble, doing our own things, and we're all part of society, but we forget this relationship between society and the individual, that they each impact each other. And so the society is made up of a lot of individuals, you know, all of us. And so the starting point would be to start changing ourselves. Because, you know, to change ourselves, the first thing we need is an education, and not an education that allows us to fit into the economy. You know, we need an education to learn how to make money and get a training for that. But it first starts with the education and development of the individual.
Are you talking in a spiritual sense?
In a spiritual sense,
Okay.
but also in terms of just, you know, human quality, human character. And so, you know, it's more development of human character, which cannot have a reference just on the material sense. You know, having more money, having more wealth doesn't make a better human being. And we have to learn how to allow the human being to find the power in the being and not in the having. You know, a lot more value is given to the things we can have and what we can accumulate, but not as much value is given to who a person can become and how he can become a better person. So I think the first step would be to start putting, you know, programs together to help individuals. And, you know, New Acropolis obviously does a lot of this, and that's where, you know, for me, what was important to come to New Acropolis is to learn how to make a difference, you know, how to make a change in my life, but also have changes that can impact the lives of others as well.
So then how do you go from that, like a Gandhi did,
Yeah.
and actually affect the world?
No, that's a great point. So, I mean, you know, just the way anything has to start small, it cannot start on a big scale, right? Everything that's happened in the history of humanity starts really small. So if we have more and more people practicing the principles, and they're not principles of Gandhi, I mean, that's the key point I want to also get through this lecture. Gandhi is more an example of these universal principles that we see, and he shows us how applying these universal principles allows you to make that change. You know, so the idea is that the more individuals learn how to become better themselves, they can impact not only themselves, but people around them as well. So, you know, what we need is, you know, it's like having a dark room, and what we need is one small candle of light that can radiate. But from that, people can learn how to radiate themselves. So, you know, we're talking more about putting these values through example, but for that, we first need an individual education and individual development. And as more and more people learn how to do that, they can come together and learn how to harmonize working together as well.
Is that how you think he did it?
Yeah, well, I mean, the biggest thing we discover if anyone is able to come to the lecture on Saturdays, we start discovering about his life to learn more about, you know, how did he transform himself? Because he wasn't born this way, to be able to bring all these ideals into practice. And, you know, the key thing of what he shows us as, you know, to all of humanity is that to combat hatred, violence, you know, uncourteous or greed and all these different vices, we need to look at the virtues. And he used the virtue of love to combat violence and oppression that was shown by, you know, the oppressors of the British at that time.
Okay, I got a question for you. Because
Yeah.
the last time Sandra was here, right, you remember, you know what we're going to talk about here, right?
Yes, I do.
We actually were talking with
Sacred activist?
yes, a sacred activist. And we talked about Gandhi and the example that he did in India with dealing with the British,
Yeah.
right? And using his techniques, nonviolence, whatever you want to call that, right? It worked on the British. Then the question was, would those same techniques have worked against the Nazis? And we kind of all agreed, I think, that no, they wouldn't. It did work against the British, who were reasonable, who had an image of themselves as good people, right? But against the Nazis, who were just unreasonable and very violent, it just wouldn't have worked. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, what's interesting is actually Gandhi had some correspondence with Hitler as well during his time. And if we explore this principle of nonviolence that we talk about, we have documentation, and even the movie Gandhi shows that the British weren't understanding. They were oppressors, and in the time, it's human nature. When you're in power, you take power and you push and you use the power that you have. So the whole technique of nonviolence is to try and show the other person that what they're doing is not right. But what that requires is that the person practicing this is even stronger on the inside, is able to withstand blows and oppression again and again, to keep getting up and show the person saying, you know what, I'm not going to fight back because that will create more violence.
Yeah,
but instead I'm going to keep resisting the violence. I'm not going to succumb to the power that you push back to me.
So he actually talked to Hitler?
Well, he sent him a letter. He sent him a correspondence at a very human level, and there's some documentation. I don't know offhand exactly what that correspondence was, but just sharing with Hitler again about the human aspect of things, that at the end of it all, we are all human beings. And again, with this lecture, the idea is to try and actually look at these elements to see how we can apply it in our daily lives, because today, for all of us individually, maybe we don't have a nation to free, or we don't have, to be an activist, but just observing in our day-to-day life, how do we react to things? Do we ever get angry?
So maybe we can be reactivists.
Well, I think we need to be. I mean, I don't know if you had the Occupy thing going on in Boston, but I mean, there's a lot of people, and now people are saying that the whatever the most recent primary in wherever it was fixed, was rigged, that Ron Paul really won, but the polls are rigged, right? And obviously the anonymous people, the Occupy people, they're feeling a need for some kind of activist, some kind of change in the United States, but everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah, no,
but they don't want violence either, though. They're not.
I don't know about these anonymous guys.
Maybe computer violence. They're called hackers, right?
Yeah. Well, so they're doing that kind of. They do not forgive, they do not forget.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Well, okay, so from your perspective, how do you feel about all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, what we see with Gandhi, and again, not just with Gandhi, but what we see with universal principles is that, as human beings, we have to get back to the root of what fundamental values are and learn how to develop those. And it sounds very idealistic, right? We're always saying, we need to learn how to be peaceful, learn how to be generous and kind and all these different aspects. But it's not just enough to study these things. We have to learn how to put them into practice in our day-to-day life. And so, the idea with the lecture is to really bring out those elements that at an individual level, what can all of us do where we are? Because all of us have a different background. We might be in different cities, facing different challenges on a day-to-day level as well. So the idea isn't that what we are trying to learn from Gandhi is just for people who are activists and trying to make a difference at the political level, but we are talking about the human being at an individual level. In our day-to-day life, what do we experience? Do we ever have a bias and prejudice against different things or different people? When we are having discussions with loved ones or people we don't know, do we react and get angry sometimes, right? So because when we look at violence, what is the seed of that violence? It's inside the human being. It's not outside. And so, the idea is also to learn how to observe our own selves and see how can we all learn to use peace and love in our own lives, just with everything we do. The actions we take, do we bring more beauty and justice and harmony to these actions? And it could be for everyone because it's universal. And everyone might, try to bring a little bit more in their family, might bring a little bit more in the work environment that they live in. Because Gandhi's simple motto was, we all need to learn how to be the change that we want to see in the world first. Okay. And, as we do it, more and more people can go in that direction, learn how to work with each other, and slowly over time we can build something better. So it's a long project. It's not something that'll happen in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. To change the world, it's going to be hundreds of years maybe, but we have to start somewhere.
Well, it starts this weekend right here in Toronto at New Acropolis. Now, who would be people? What kind of people would be interested in this, and what can they take away from this? And I don't know. We're going to get all the details, but do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, my goal with this lecture wasn't so much to just talk about how great Gandhi was, because, we all feel inspired when we see a great human being from a spiritual perspective, political perspective, in the sports field, and so on. The idea was it's an accepted fact he was great. We can look at some facts about it and explore. So I'm going to present some video clips from the movie just to give people an idea who don't know about his life. But then the crux of the lecture is to really focus on how did he become that person? Because just like all of us, he had trials and tribulations in his life.
He's still human.
He met with failure. He had a lot of fear. Despite all of this, how did he take on the weight of leading a country to freedom, but not only lead it to freedom, but by conquering his own inner battles?
I can't imagine this man had fear.
Well, that's the thing. So it's in the lecture, that's the thing we explore, which is not shown in the movies and not captivated in a lot of books out there. Is what was he like before he was called the Mahatma?
So maybe if people see him in a more human light, then we can relate to him more and think, wow, if he can do that, then maybe we can do just a snippet of what he can do.
Exactly, yeah, and it's also more important to see that more than, if he did that, how did he do it? Because if, the thing is we all can see that, we see that person being very patient, very loving, very kind, but we don't all necessarily have a clear path on how the person does it. And that's the key thing we discover with Gandhi. We actually understand, and the goal is to present in the lecture about how did he do this transformation within himself.
That's fabulous. So people can actually learn how to do it themselves and become more Gandhi-like, right?
Yeah, and at least have a clear understanding of what this path is, and more than Gandhi-like, just become more human.
Yeah.
Well, he really was the epitome of what a human,
the
potential for a human.
Exactly, and that's the reason for me Gandhi is inspirational, not so much because he's Gandhi or he's from India, but he was able to take the human qualities that exist universally all amongst us and be able to practice it, and show us the power of what happens when we practice it, how we can truly change people and the environment around us. Because it's hard to imagine, like, how can love take the British who are ruling the country with power, don't want to leave it, how can it transform them over time? It didn't happen in a year or two. He spent a 30-year campaign of non-resistance. So it also shows us that it was a long-term project, but his goal wasn't to free India. His goal was to try and change what was inside the human being.
And it's interesting, we look at that period of history now and we know what happened.
Yeah.
Right? And it was, it was successful, although the end for Gandhi was very tragic.
Yeah.
But he succeeded in his project. But when you think about it, in the midst of all that, there was no hindsight, and he had not succeeded yet. And it's easy to look back and say he was successful, but he must have had doubts every step of the way trying to lead India through that very difficult process.
Well, what's interesting is that people around him had doubts, and we see that through his life, but he never had doubts, partly because what he had discovered in his life, which we'll talk about in the lecture, is universal principles. And what he had realized is that if they're universal and they're principles, then they will always win at the end. Maybe it'll take really long, but they'll always win. So what's also interesting about Gandhi is he developed in himself, and it wasn't something that he developed and he was done. No, it was a constant process through his life to constantly develop and strengthen these principles within him with the conviction. It wasn't just a faith or a belief. It was a conviction through practice. So he was someone who really experimented with these ideas, with these principles, and took a journey on forming his character rather than forming a career.
So the ultimate test, actually.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's this weekend. Now, Lorinda, you're here. Do you have any comments about this before we give out all the details how people can participate?
I would just like to say that at New Acropolis we like to highlight great examples of being human or human beings, and a big thank you to Parth for coming and sharing. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful Saturday afternoon.
Okay, so what time does it start, and where is it?
1 o'clock. It starts at 1 o'clock, and it'll go for a few hours at the Center for Social Innovation, which is at 215 Spadina.
Which is just north of Queen on the east side, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, between Dundas and Queen. Yeah, and tickets are $25 regular and $15 for full-time students. That's
fabulous. So. And is there a website where people can go to get
Yeah, I would say
tickets?
The best website is www.newacropolis.ca.
Okay, and then all the contact information is there, and they can get in touch with somebody.
Yeah, and you can reserve
tickets.
online.
That's fabulous.
Wow.
Okay. All right, guys. Great.
Be the
Parth,
change.
thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
to have this conversation. Great to meet you. And
Great to meet you as well.
best of luck with this. And you got to come back next time you're in Toronto.
Thank you for doing this work, and I
Yeah.
feel like you're kind of bringing Gandhi through. He's
Yeah.
kind of resurfacing again.
Absolutely.
But you know, be the change is his line. But for me, the most telling line,
Yeah.
the one I live by, is you can judge the state of a nation
Yeah.
by the way it treats its animals.
Yeah. That's what he
Can I
said.
say one more thing?
Yes, one more.
What was it? Oh.
We're so in
okay.
our now moment.
Just be the change. And something that I find exemplary, and that's a feature of New Acropolis, is that the aim is to voluntarily be the change. It's not to be paid to be the change. And so that's something that I would say
And
is a
that's
hallmark.
a good point. That's a good point,
New
because
Acropolis,
it really is.
I don't know. I think they should be paid. I think when Michelle gets done with his work, we can all get paid for doing the work.
Or maybe we won't need money at all.
Maybe.
Anyway,
Although that's a whole
anyway.
other show. Okay. Thanks,
New Acropolis,
guys.
we're full of volunteers.
Okay, great.
And ideas.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, Parth Doshi, Lorinda Crawford, thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a little break, and we're going to come back with, well, we got so many guests. We have Steve Cameron is here with the hockey book. We're going to be talking about that. We got Captain Revenue is in the house. We got Philip Ames is here. It's just a jam-packed show. We'll be right back here on ThatChannel.com.
You know, Captain Revenue, same colors as.
I know.